You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
When we started writing our thoughts down on paper, it opened up endless possibilities. Ideas could grow beyond the borders of the mind, and it changed the world. Somewhere along the way, we lost touch with paper, distracted by devices made for every purpose except for thinking and focus. On edge, waiting for the next notification. But what if new technology didn't pull us away from paper, but brought us closer to it? Listen. That's not paper. It's the sound of the new Remarkable Paper Pro, rewriting the future. A paper tablet with a true color ink display, gentle reading light, and unheard of tactility. With digital features for taking notes, thinking, and organizing, without any distractions. Paper is about to change the world again. Get your paper tablet at remarkable.com today.
Join us and unwind with a good book. Welcome to Relaxing Reads.
Hi, it's Deb in Halifax.
Hi, it's Simone in Vancouver.
And hey, it's Tanya in Edmonton.
Our latest read is Counterfeit by Kirsten Chen. Ava Wong, a straight-laced Chinese-American lawyer, and her former enigmatic college roommate Winnie reconnect after 20 years and become entangled in a scheme that involves importing counterfeit luxury handbags. When trouble arises, Winnie disappears, leaving Ava to deal with the consequences. It's a con artist story, a pop feminist caper taking us through the world of dreamy handbags. Fun, right? Except nothing in this novel is what it seems. This book gives great insight into identity and self-discovery and the ever-elusive American dream. Well, this was quite the novel. Yeah, what did you think, Simone?
Well, this novel came to me as I follow Reese Witherspoon, and I always love her book club pick. So when she was kind of going on about this book, I was like, okay, this would be a great one for our book club. And it just caught my attention because it was like Hustlers meets Big Little Lies. So I was like, ooh, this is going to be good and juicy. And it took me a little bit to get into it, and I think Tanya, you had kind of mentioned that as well when we were chatting online. But once I got into it, there was just so many twists and turns, and I felt like I was, it kept me on my toes, kept me wondering what was going to happen. And really, I was surprised by the end of it as to where this novel went, but it was a good ride for sure.
I was surprised. Yeah, I was surprised too. And I thought it was a fascinating story. It's something that I know absolutely nothing about. And yeah, getting into it was a little hard because I'm so used to punctuation, right? It just tells you everything. We all know from the Twitter world that, punctuation does make a difference. So it was just a little bit like, who's talking? Oh, okay. So, but then once you get it figured out, it becomes relatively easy and you get into the characters. And I just thought, again, it was a world I didn't know anything about. And fashion is really, it's just so cool, how people really get into it. And I just think that, post-COVID, like, I don't even do my hair anymore, let alone makeup. And I'm like, Tanya, you got to up your game here, So if anything, this novel was like, Tanya, pay attention to fashion because it actually makes a difference how you look. So yeah, fascinating read for me, for sure.
Yeah, I felt initially getting into it was a little, it took a bit of time for me as well, but I got a bit of a high. I don't know why. I found it very exhilarating. There was a bit of an adrenaline rush, and I love fashion, but I'm definitely not a fashionista. I am far from it. So I admire people who are, in their game or at the top of their game as far as fashion goes, and the knowledge that comes with it. I had no idea until this book what it was all about, the counterfeit purse market, that there is such a thing. I mean, we hear about knockoffs and there's scams and absolutely everything around us. But yeah, I found this quite exhilarating.
Yeah. And I've just, the whole counterfeit business, I'm not a purse person, but I think I am now. What was interesting is I actually went and looked for the purse.
Yeah.
I looked for the purse. I went on, I think I went on Amazon. And it gave me a couple images, and then there's the Kelly bag. It came up, $41,000.
Yeah. See,
and I went,
Yeah.
wow, no wonder people go like with they call them 1-to-1s in the book, and I'm like,
Yeah.
no wonder.
I'm definitely
It's crazy.
I'm definitely a bag person. Like, I am a bag collector, and I have a few designer bags, but this is one of those things that I've been collecting for like 20 years. And it happens like if it's a milestone, like I bought myself a nice bag when I turned 30, or, my husband bought me one when I had my son, like things like that. So they're kind of like, for me, it's one of those like, okay, I did something important, or I had a milestone in my career or in my life, and I purchased them and I like to have them, but I don't have a lot. So when I see people with new bags constantly online or social media, now this book has me wondering, are they authentic? Because how do you, like, unless all of your paychecks are going there, how do you afford that? And it's totally the status. And for me, like, I've collected the classics that I know won't go out of style. But when you get into the trendy bags, like that's a tough world to keep up with, because there's always a new it bag every month when it comes to the world of fashion. So I don't even know how you would keep up with that kind of an expense.
Well, just in West Edmonton Mall, like where our stations are sort of at the pricey end of the mall. And my goodness, there are some stores, I can't get them, I can't remember what the names are, but that are at this end of the mall that I just sort of waltz by and I look in the windows and I'm like, oh. There's no way I can afford that. And it's just so crazy to think that people, the really, we're talking thousands of dollars, right? Like, how does anyone do that? And Simone, to your point, like, you got bags to mark an occasion, right? It's a special event, and it's sort of like, why do people want these bags? And even further, if you can't tell the difference between a fake one and a real one, like, what is that? I don't know.
I know. And that's like when I was in, and for me, it's like, that's the intention, right? Like, I'll set aside, if I want this, I'm going to set aside this amount of dollars. It could be for, whatever your lifestyle, what you want. So whether it's that amazing trip you want to go on, you're going to put money aside for it, right? And then once you get it or you go there, it's a moment for you to say, hey, I did it. And when I was in New York, and this is the thing, I don't buy a lot of bags for that reason. They're expensive. And when I was in New York, this woman held up a bag, and it was like this Saint Laurent bag. And she's like, here, I'll give it to you. And it looked like an exact replica of an amazing Saint Laurent bag. And I was like, how much is it? She's like, $50. And I was like, what? She's like, I'll give it to you for 40, for 30. And my husband was like, keep walking. And I was like, Mandeep, it's like $30. And he was like, I know, but it's going to fall apart. And, when you carry the knockoff, it's not going to bring you as much joy as if you just take your time to save up for something you want. And then it's that moment of you did it. So that's kind of how I see it. And I get it. Like, now when you see people on social media and you're constantly thrust in that spotlight of all these things people consume and they buy, and people are trying to keep up with the Joneses, then it's hard to do when you're on a limited budget. So that is probably why the counterfeit business survives, because people want to, like Tanya, you talked about fashion, it plays such a big part. It's your art, it's your expression. And, if you can't afford a $4,000 bag, and you're going to buy a $40 bag that nobody would know, then this is why people do it, right?
Yeah.
And it's like,
you become
they mentioned
obsessed with it, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And they mentioned in the book how, why do people get these bags? And they say it's like a status symbol. It's like saying, I went to Harvard,
Yeah.
I can afford this bag. This definitely sets you apart. And I think, one of the things that surprised me about this book is the intricate level that they get to in those black markets of making these bags, where they literally take apart the real thing piece by piece, and then they go and build the counterfeit. And I'm like, oh my goodness! Like I didn't go to that area in New York that you're talking about, Simone, but I've been to LA, like downtown LA, and I've been in some of those. Like it's such a weird. It almost is like a black market down there, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. Pretty naive at the time, but now I'm like, that's totally what is happening down there.
Yeah. And you know, and it's like people say, oh, well, the designer luxury labels, they make so much money, so what does it matter? But then it's that whole point of, you know, they're catering to a certain group of people, the elite who have that status in the world, but then there's regular people who are like, well, I want to have that status, right? So I mean, like, it's tough. And I think better than getting into the world of counterfeits, like resale is so big. So I know that so many like consignment shops have popped up that deal with these luxury bags for, you know, a quarter of the cost or something like that. And I think that's a better route to take because you're still going to get that quality. And if you need something fixed, like, you know, if something in your counterfeit falls apart, like that one case in the book, the lady took the bag back. You're not getting it repaired, and you could have paid a couple $100s for it. Whereas if you just went to consignment, paid a little bit more, you can still take it to that luxury brand and get the strap replaced or get a zipper replaced and just have it longer.
Yeah, I'm more of the consignment type girl. I love bags, but I don't have any brands. I love the look of so many of the brands, but I just haven't gone there yet. But I do love the idea of consignment. But yeah, I think it's a very obsessive thing that once you get into, it's hard to kind of move away from it. You become part of this, I don't know, this culture, right?
Yeah. And, you know, like sometimes my husband doesn't get it when I'm like, oh, so-and-so bought that bag or so-and-so has this one. And he's like, I don't get it. And I'm like, yeah, but a bag is a part of my everyday. Like I carry it, you bring your stuff in it, my purse, like it's something you don't leave the house without. So it's an important thing for us to consider that somebody else may not consider if you don't carry bags, right?
Right. So, I mean, maybe it's a car for somebody else, you know, a specific sports car or, you know,
something,
whatever. Everybody has their thing.
Everyone has their thing. And like you said, addictive. Like it could be like getting a tattoo. You get one and now I've heard you want multiples. I don't have any tattoos, but that's how it starts. You buy something, it makes you feel good. You take care of that item and then you're like, okay, well, maybe in a couple years I'm going to buy another one. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, like for me, it's cars. Like I love sports cars, and I have one, and you know, hopefully before I'm 60, I can get the ultimate one. But it's just like I have so much fun driving that car.
Yeah,
and it's just like a part of me, and so I get this whole
thrill,
you know, the purse thing, the thrill of it,
the high. Yeah.
And it was like that moment in the book where there was that they talk about that crocodile red Birkin bag, and it was just the moment it came out on the table. So like you said, whatever that is for you, a car driving by or like an amazing glass of wine, like whatever your thrill is, this is what you're going to chase.
Yeah, you know, and it's so funny because I have notes in my iPhone, and like at one point I was thinking, you know, Tanya, really, you should get some iconic pieces, you know? And I actually had written in my iPhone, because I went and checked it, it was a Burberry trench coat, which is over $3,500, an Hermes scarf, over $500, and I had the Birkin purse. But I didn't know what it was really. I just knew it was Birkin, right? I'm like, okay. But now this book has opened my eyes to that industry of purses, and I'm getting a real understanding and an appreciation for what it's all about.
Yeah.
The real stuff and the one-to-ones. Like, it's fascinating.
And I know some people break it down for like cost per wear, right? So say you're going to spend, you know, $1,000 or $2,000 on a bag, and it seems like a lot. Or over the course of those 10 years, you're going to buy like $100 or $200 bag. And so people say, but I will carry my nice one every single day. So when you break it down, it's like $1 a day for this many days, and it's paid off by that point. And I just love it so much. And same with that trench coat. Like if you're an adult, you know, you've already grown. It's not like kids. You have to buy them something new every year. And you know you're going to take care of that Burberry trench coat for the rest of your life. And it's there. It's a staple. It's an iconic piece. And like I said, spending on the staples as opposed to trendy items is the better route.
Actually, I kind of agree with you. I'm sort of at the point now where I see stores and I'm like, oh my goodness, that is just trash clothing. And I'm not going to go into it a lot because I know that, you know, it takes a lot of water to make clothing. And I'm like, okay, Tanya, like, go get the good white t-shirt, go get as good as you can afford, because it's not throwaway clothing. And I don't like that whole, that throwaway clothing that is out there. I know there has to be clothing for every price point and for everybody, but I'm going to choose to not go to those stores that it's just en masse and it's just like
the fast fashion. Yeah, a lot
the
of that.
fast fashion. I don't agree with it. So don't agree with it, and I think it might be something that will come up in the next 20 years that it doesn't exist anymore. And I really hope that's the case.
But that's the truth. A lot of those pieces from fast fashion are knockoffs of designer pieces, and they're coming out really quick. So you see a celebrity wearing something incredible and you're like, wow, I love that dress, but I can't afford that dress. So then you go onto those fast fashion websites and that dress is like $50 and you're like, I can get the look for less. And
I know, you're
buy
right.
it. So it's it's all based on like that counterfeit concept of not having the real thing.
And I wonder if, talking about consignment shops, if that's why there are so many more than ever before. And when you walk in and talk to the shopkeeper, whoever's running the boutiques, they have a lot of knowledge about all of these pieces. So you wonder, had they had a hand in working in that industry prior to opening up their own consignment shops and know the value of the product that they're putting out, so when they're buying from people who are dropping off, or they got however many years out of it, if that's perhaps why they want to kind of stop those other shops from doing what they're doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Certainly like the higher end consignment shops, there's a lot here. The people who run them, they know what they're doing. I mean, I can take stuff there and I'm thinking, oh, this is pretty good. And they're like, nope. And they know what they're looking for. They're looking for quality. They're looking for brands that sell. So it's the whole fashion industry is amazing, actually.
Yeah.
I don't know whether you guys ever worked like retail, when you were young. I mean, I certainly did. I worked at Le Chateau and sold shoes to strippers. It was awesome because they would buy like 10 colors of the same shoe. I'm like, made my quota. But I find fashion really, really kind of funny. So getting back to the book, who did you guys like, Ava or Winnie? Because it switches in terms of, you think it's like Winnie's the bad person, and then it switches, and then you get Winnie's point of view, and like, oh my goodness, what is going on?
That's exactly it. I liked Ava, and I was like, oh my God, she's a new mom. Her hormones are all over the place. She's getting caught up in this scandal. And then when you get to the end, I was like, whoa. And then Winnie had the soft spot for, her boss, who she treated like an elderly or like a father figure. And you're like, oh, she has a bit more of a soul. She actually cares.
Yeah.
And she had a bad family life, so she had to get into this world. But I'm like, Ava, really, you didn't have any big problems that led you to that world. You kind of had a okay upbringing. You had some quarrels with your family and stuff, but it seemed like it wasn't as bad. But yeah, it switched for me, definitely. I was team Ava in the beginning and then team Winnie, and at the end I was team Maria.
I know.
Oh, Maria. Oh, wasn't she fun?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
All very endearing characters. But I think that I was definitely Ava initially. And then when things were unfolding and we learned so much more, she kind of reminded me of, what was her name? Anna Delvey from Inventing Anna.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
And how you get into whatever you believe is happening, I guess you tell so many fibs, so many lies that you start to believe them, and you get better at telling those stories or telling it as you believe it happened. And that's how I kind of felt with Ava. And Winnie was kind of, abrupt or in your face. She told it like it is, but she wasn't as warm initially, I guess. But yeah, I did love Winnie. But yeah, interesting characters.
Absolutely. Like I was sort of Ava. I mean, I didn't know what was going on. When it did the switch, I'm like, Ava's not telling the truth? What's going on? Then you get Winnie's point of view. I liked Winnie because she was just this.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
I just felt she was very real. And then I sort of got with Ava, like, who's the businesswoman here, right? Mm-hmm. Who's the one who's like really making things happen? And for me, I kind of thought that was Ava at the end of the day. You know, I mean, she's in a career that she doesn't even want. She doesn't even like being a lawyer. But because of her upbringing, I think it was written in the book that, you know, there are 3 professions that a Chinese family says you should go into: law, medicine, and engineering. Pick one and do it well enough until you retire. There's nothing about happiness in there. So I'm like, okay, so she picked the lawyer, but she didn't really want to do it. And then she's got this other adventure. So when the book flipped for me, I'm like, oh, wow, that's what Ava's really like. I loved it. I loved it.
And it was so interesting that it was like, and whenever I thought I kind of knew what was going on, like my mind would wander. Like there were times where when Winnie would meet up with Ava's husband, I was like, are they having an affair? Is something going on there? Because like
I thought that,
she would know, Ava would say something and she'd be like, oh, I already talked to him and that's not happening, or this and that. And she'd be like, how does she know? And I was like, is that why he got the place far away from home? Like what's going to happen here in this dynamic? Or is she setting Ava up to go to jail so she can end up with her husband? Like my mind was all over the place.
You know, I was floored when Ava went home and her husband cut her off.
Oh, yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, I was like, I had to stop reading. I'm like, who does that?
Yeah.
Who cuts off your finances? Oh my goodness.
And that just
was
like
crazy.
A little bit of that was like their relationship was immature in that way at times, right? Like just
It was
picking the fights and that kind of thing. So I'm like, maybe Ava, again, she's struggling with having this difficult child for now. Like he's a young boy, so she's got a lot of things with him. She doesn't have a lot of support from the husband. And then this excitement comes into her life, and it's that thrill we're talking about, chasing that like, ooh, I get to be somebody my parents and didn't want me to be, or, you know, and she's coming out in a different way. I think this is her little outlet of being a little bit dangerous and not being a boring mom and wife who's lost her identity since she's left her career.
Right. I think on paper they looked really good as a couple, but perhaps that was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. Her son was quite the. I was trying to figure out what was wrong with him. Actually,
yeah, what was going on?
Wrong with Ava's son? What was going on there? You know, like did he have some challenges? You know, that they just weren't aware of, and yet her husband's this surgeon. So shouldn't he know? But I don't know. That was an interesting part of the whole story, was the challenges that their son had.
Or it's just the terrible twos.
Or it could be.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And how about the friendship that they had together, Ava and Winnie? What did you think about that?
Well, at first I thought they were going to throw each other under the bus. Like I thought there was going to be something, like they had a great friendship. Well, not a great friendship, but they kind of had an understanding and they were friends. And then they got into this business idea and it kind of went back and forth. And then there was a moment at the end where I thought, okay, Winnie's going to completely throw Ava under the bus and just set her up for everything. And she's going to get caught, or Ava's setting Winnie up. So I was like, this friendship is going to dissolve. It's done like after this. But when you get to the end of the book, this friendship is just getting stronger.
Yeah,
exactly. Exactly. I think they just sort of like, what are those couples that are codependent, right? I kind of think that they are a little bit, you know, one doesn't exist without the other. They both need each other on some level. And obviously that continues at the end of the book, and for how long, we don't know. So I thought that was really interesting, the dynamic of that friendship, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. I think they both needed each other for a lot of things.
Yeah, no, exactly. And then sort of, you know, in book 3, and you find out that that Winnie's gone that extra step of getting cosmetic surgery to completely change her look.
Yeah.
That was like, I'm like, I would never do that. Do people do that?
Yes,
Maybe
people
that's
do that.
Maybe that's the question for the author.
You think, because you think about if you're a wanted person and someone's looking for you and you don't want to get caught, you're going to do things to change your appearance. See, Tanya, you don't think about these things because you're not living in the criminal underworld.
Unlike
You're
Simone
right.
and myself.
I'm not a criminal.
But I think
That's why I have a collection of wigs. I haven't gone the surgery route yet, but I've got a lot of wigs.
you're safe because we see you post on Instagram with your wigs. So you're not hiding from anyone.
This is true. Very true. Yeah, not yet. And so we kind of talked a bit about the ending. What do you think will happen with this next adventure, this next business venture that they've got coming up?
You know what? The fact that they say they're going to use men now, like, I didn't understand that part. Like, do they feel like, the women didn't really lead, it wasn't successful enough? But like how sometimes I feel like women can sometimes be smarter than men when it comes to a lot of things. So I don't know how this is going to work. And if, again, they've once, if they've evaded the police once, they can do it again. Maybe that's their mindset. So I don't know. I think they kind of learned how not to do it. And so they might actually be successful.
I think they're going to do it. Like I think they are. I think they'll go as far as they can, and then there'll be a slip up, and they're slippery. I think they're going to get out of it somehow and go on to something else. I just see this thing kind of continuing, and to the thing about the men, like I can kind of see it. A sharp, I don't say sharp dressed man, but I just did. A good looking, mid-30s guy who's very professional, has an air of confidence. I mean, I get that they would be very believable.
Yeah.
Perhaps
and just society-wise, I just think that there's that layer of like the successful guy. And I mean, certainly we see it within businesses and they get paid more than women do. That's starting to change, but it's still there. It's still there. So I just think that there's like that confidence, that acceptance of the well-dressed, confident guy, and that you don't need to question him. I think it's a smart move in that diamond, that business that they're in now.
Or if all doesn't go according to their plan, perhaps they're also thinking Thelma and Louise, and that guy can be Brad Pitt's, character. They'll pick up and travel that way, go that route.
So then we think about this novel being adapted for television.
Yeah,
Brad Pitt in this.
Oh, that'd be awesome. Well, this book left a lot of kind of questions open. So a great time to chat with Kirsten herself and get some of those questions answered that we have.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Counterfeits author herself, Kirsten Chen, is with us. Thank you so much for being with us. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm thrilled to be here. I always love, it's always fun meeting with people who have already read the book, and then we don't have to be so careful about spoilers. So this is a treat for me.
Oh, well, you must say it is a treat that you have come up with. So thank you for writing this. How did you come up with the concept for Counterfeit?
I mean, it's a question I get a lot because it's such a seemingly random topic, counterfeit luxury handbags. And I think, a lot of novel writing is just kind of paying attention to ideas and kind of sniffing out the good ones. And in all honesty, the idea for this novel started as a joke. A couple of years ago, I was working on my last novel, which is a very different book. It's called Bury What We Cannot Take. It was set in 1950s southern China. It's historical fiction. It required an incredible amount of research. And I remember after a particularly grueling day of work, I turned to my spouse and I said, listen, the next book that I write is going to require zero research, and it's going to have to be about the only topic I'm already an expert in, and that's designer handbags. And, we laughed. Neither of us took it seriously. I kind of forgot about the idea. And then a couple months later, I came across an article in the Washington Post that described a real-life counterfeit handbag con artist who had this seemingly perfect scheme. And I read that scheme and I thought, this belongs in a novel. And that really planted the seeds for the book when I realized that it was not about designer handbags, but it was actually about counterfeit designer handbags.
You know, what's interesting, I was telling Tanya and Deb this. I myself love designer handbags, but I was telling them I've kind of collected them over 20 years because it takes a lot of time to save up, and I do it for milestone moments like, you know, a 30th birthday or when my son was born. But then you see how they're so expensive. And then I was in New York recently, and someone was trying to sell me a Saint Laurent bag for $40, and it looked legit. And then I was like, what? Like this is still so around because it's that whole status thing, you know, with the bags. And now it's like, how do you even tell what's real and what's fake?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think that's a big question in the book is what makes something counterfeit and what makes something authentic, especially as the quality of counterfeits has really improved rapidly in the past, like let's say decade or 2 decades. Technology has really improved. The counterfeits are getting better and better, and the price tags of counterfeits are very high, you know, for the really, really good so-called super fakes. But like you, Simone, you know, I have started to question my love of handbags. You know, I too am I have a deep love of handbags. I too use it to mark milestone moments, as you say. And it's actually now that I've started doing publicity for this book, and I have to talk a lot about my love of handbags, that I've actually started to interrogate it. You know, I think prior to going on tour for this book, my love of handbags was very pure and unequivocal. And now, you know, I'm starting to see the contradictions, the conflicts, I'm starting to question why I love, you know, this particular product so deeply.
And you know what? I think it gets hard to keep up. There's a new it bag almost every month, and you can't have them all. Like, you can either buy the classics and feel like those will take you through life. But I think it's just become a world where, you know, with social media and Instagram, everybody wants to have the it bag, and it gets hard to keep up. And that's why I think the counterfeit business is still thriving so much.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think with age, too, I've seen that, you know, you get this kind of, the internet does see this urge where you see something and you have this like overwhelming sensation, like I must have that. And then, you know, a week or two later, if you can kind of take a step back, you realize, oh, I didn't really want it that much. You know, that kind of fleeting desire was really an illusion, or exactly that, fleeting. And so, I mean, I'm interested too in just consumerist culture, why we consume what we consume. You know, all of us spend money on particular things, and it's very easy to kind of judge what other people choose to spend money on. And so I'm interested in that as well. And obviously social media exacerbates that because we're constantly exposed to what people are buying.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think you mentioned something, Kirsten, about, you know, what if you can't tell the difference between a real bag and a counterfeit bag, what is the value of a bag then? You know, like what would you know, and what about the person, you know, the one who can afford the real thing and the person who goes to New York and gets the, you know, the $50 Saint Laurent bag? Like, how do they feel knowing that they're carrying a counterfeit? Did you come across any of that?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that's kind of one of the deeper philosophical questions, if you will. You know, when you look at these super fakes that are made from the same materials, that are sometimes made in factories by people who have worked on the authentic merchandise, and you know, I've heard experts say that with these really, really high quality fakes, sometimes the only thing distinguishing an authentic bag from a counterfeit bag is a serial number that the brands have implanted into the authentic bag simply so that they can tell it apart from these super fakes. And so, yes, if all that differentiates them is a serial number, what makes something real and what makes something fake, what gives something its value. You know, I was thinking I think often of a line that Winnie, one of the characters in the book, says to Ava, and she says, you know, my Birkin bag is not so different from your Stanford degree. And Ava is kind of really offended by this, and she's like, "What are you talking about? The two things have nothing in common." But I think that, you know, the kind of provocative point Winnie is making is the biggest value that both those things have is that it signals who you are to the world in a big way. That people take that signal, give that symbol value. And I don't want to digress too much, but I've been thinking a lot about these studies that come out every year or every couple of years where social scientists track high school seniors who have, say, gotten into Harvard. I don't know if you've come across any of these studies, but every couple of years, the media kind of reports on them. So they track high school students who are admitted to Harvard, and half of them go to Harvard, and the other half decide to go to a cheaper state school. And then 10 years later, the researchers come back to see how successful those students are. And invariably, both groups of students, the ones that decided to go to state school and the ones that went to Harvard, are almost equally successful, which obviously raises the question, well, is it the Harvard education that is valuable, or is that Harvard is admitting the best students from the beginning, and so therefore, when they graduate, they're still the best? You know, and so that's kind of a very concrete example of why a college education might not be worth as much as society says it is. And so, it's very easy to say handbags are frivolous, Harvard is not frivolous, but really, if you dig deeper, everything is more complicated than it seems.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I guess it's like winning the state championship or getting that crown.
Yeah, exactly. What does it mean to be a winner? What does it mean? Yeah. I mean, I think that we're always looking for ways to kind of slot people into easy categories. And of course, the truth is always more complicated.
Yes, definitely. It was very interesting how it was narrated first by Ava and then switching to Winnie. Why was it that you took that route for the book?
Yeah. The point of view shifts are maybe the most noticeable craft aspect of the book. I think that I, as a writer, have always thought of point of view as a really interesting tool for creating suspense, right? I think that point of view, each character can only know what they know. That's the interesting thing about point of view. You know, if you don't have an omniscient narrator, this kind of God-like narrator who can see all and can tell you what everyone is thinking, then each point of view is necessarily limited. And so I'm always interested in how people keep secrets from each other, on how people say one thing to someone else but then think another thing in their heads. Like, that's always been one of the most exciting aspects about writing fiction, because fiction is really the only art form where you can really get deep into your characters' heads, right? Like, if you're watching a movie, you can see the actor's expression and you can hear the words they're saying, but you very seldom get their thoughts unless there's some kind of voiceover narration, which is a pretty kind of specific conceit. And so, the most exciting thing about literature and fiction has always been interiority and interior thoughts. And so I think that was kind of my approach with this book, was thinking about how using Ava's point of view and Winnie's point of view and switching at strategic times could really be a tool for suspense.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I was reading it. I'm like, yes, it is true. There are two sides to every story.
And also, nobody's the villain of their own story, right? Like, there's a villain, some books have very clear villains, but if you switch the narrator and had the villain tell their side, they would be the hero, not the villain. They would completely justify what it is that they're doing, unless they're a complete sociopath. But I've always loved point of view for that reason.
Now, Kirsten, at first, the book is a con game thriller, but it ends up having a lot more larger themes. So was the starting point to write it as a thriller or to write about these bigger ideas that we find out about kind of mid-book?
Yeah, I think the bigger ideas were always front and center for me. Like, I don't think I would have set out to write a crime novel without the bigger ideas already in place. I don't consider myself a crime writer. Like I mentioned earlier, my last novel was historical fiction. My first novel was more of a coming of age. book. And so, I'm not kind of an expert at the crime genre. So really what was interesting to me about this particular crime story was these questions of what is real and what is not. What does it mean to be an authentic person? When you layer on complications of race, especially if you're a woman and a person of color, a minority, belonging to a minority group, you're constantly performing, right? You're constantly thinking about how other people view you. Like, that's just how you survive in a society where people are different from you. And I think that was really the starting point for me, was these are two women who are forced into a particular role by the society that they live in. They're viewed in a very particular way. They're told that if they behave in a particular way, these are the rewards that will come to them. And what happens when they kind of start to see around that myth, that model minority myth that they've been sold.
I liked one part in the book. It was when they were in the department store and there was like an older woman who was done up to the nines that everybody kind of knew. And she kind of just, doesn't have a really good attitude towards Winnie and Ava. And then Winnie goes, well, yeah, there's over 1 billion of us. We're everywhere. Have a nice day. I love that. I laughed out loud. I'm like, yeah. Because there's that attitude, right? From, that's just there. Yeah. Are you supposed to be here in the United States? I don't know. It's like this weird vibe, right?
I think it's an attitude that people of color are very familiar with. But I also, I'm so glad you brought up that particular moment, because I was also thinking about how Ava and Winnie would have different reactions to that woman's, rather offensive statement. So she kind of mistakes Winnie for somebody else. And then when Winnie says, that's not me, I don't even live in this city, the woman says, oh, well, there's so many of you, they're all, so many of you shop here. And Ava's really offended, and Winnie kind of laughs it off. And I was thinking a lot, too, about how their different backgrounds would shape their reactions to that scene. So Ava is born and raised in the U.S., as you say. She grew up in Newton, Massachusetts, which is this predominantly white, upper-middle-class suburb. And so she's kind of been taught to assimilate, or she's worked to assimilate her entire life, versus Winnie, who comes from China as a college student. So she comes from a place that is the largest country in the world. It's an economic powerhouse. Everybody looks and talks like her. And so she has an ease and a security that Ava will never have. She has a sense of place, and so she can laugh it off, versus Ava, who is already home and has to kind of make her home here. She is much more like, we have to change this woman's perspective. We cannot allow this to slide. So I was interested, too, in the differences between these two women who, on the surface, could look similar, both Asian American, both high achieving, both of a certain socioeconomic status.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Kristen, this isn't your first book. So what did it feel like when you got chosen to be, Reese Witherspoon's book club?
Oh, it's a little...
Was that like
Yes. I mean, I could still access that euphoria that I felt in the moment that I learned. It really is, I don't know, maybe one of the top 3 or 5 things that could ever happen to a writer. It's that life or that career changing, let's say. So to back up, it was euphoric. It was exciting.
Mm-hmm.
It has brought my book to the widest audience that I've ever reached by far. And I will also say that I'm very grateful that it happened for my third book. I think it would have been wonderful to have a debut novel that was out of the gate an overwhelming success. But I think that would have been quite difficult to deal with as a writer. I've heard writers talk about the pressure that they feel after having a really big debut, and that, sometimes you have writer's block. Sometimes it's very, very difficult to start a second book because there's now the expectations are very, very high. And for me, because this happened with my third book, I think I have a sense of perspective. I have a very strong sense of what I love about my job, which is really getting to write books and hopefully reaching the people that you're writing toward. You know, like I have a very kind of simple, pure view of my role as a writer. And I think that has equipped me to stay pretty centered in spite of all these wonderful, exciting things that have happened with this third book, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And you know, once readers get to know you through Counterfeit, then they go back and read your other books and think, oh, okay, so maybe the expectations are going to be might be a little different because your writing has been different. It's not, you know, if this was your first and you get this stamp of approval, then perhaps people will be expecting the next one to be the exact, you know, same type.
Yes, that's a very good point as well. Yes, I think, and I think that as a younger writer, it's very difficult to not give into that pressure, you know, because you've already built an audience. You know what readers want from you. Like, obviously, you want your next book to be successful. And so I think it is hard to kind of withstand that and say, well, despite the pressure to do something similar, I'm going to go ahead and do whatever project it is I want to do. And you're right, I do have that. I already have that history. I've been very fortunate that my agent and my editors have always been supportive of me kind of changing gears with each book. So you know, any writer would be fortunate to be in my position, but I feel extra lucky that it happened when it happened.
One last question, Kirsten. So when you read this book, it speaks to you as if you could see it unfolding in front of your eyes, and it has been picked up for a TV series. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes. I mean, what I've learned about Hollywood in the brief time that I've been involved in this is that everything is confidential. That is one thing they tell you. Until it is announced, it hasn't happened. But it has been incredibly gratifying to talk to different producers and different studios and to see how much this story has resonated with them. You know, when I started writing this book, I had a very clear audience in mind. I knew that I was writing this book for the Asian American community here in the U.S. You know, I was talking to my friends, to my family. You know, I knew who my exact target audience was, and so it was quite surprising to get this kind of incredible response, you know, and I've so appreciated how widely this book has resonated. And so to give you a more concrete example related to the TV adaptation, during when my film agent set up my first meeting with studio executives and producers, I was so prepared for them to ask me to change the race of one of my characters, because I had never seen a TV show with two Asian American women leads. And these aren't, you know, women in the same family. They're just two separate Asian American women leads. And I just had not really seen that on TV. And so I was kind of preparing myself, okay, if they say, you know, they want to change Winnie's race or Ava's race, what are you prepared to accept? And to my surprise, every single group that I talked to understood immediately that the ethnicity of the women was inextricably linked to the story. That you could not tell this story without two Asian American women, and they were committed to finding Chinese or Chinese American actors. They were going to find an Asian American showrunner, an Asian American director. Like, they all understood that this story would be different if they didn't respect that part of it. And so I was so impressed by that, you know, and I'm so grateful that there are movies like Crazy Rich Asians to kind of pave the way, because I know that has made a huge difference. You know, I know that if we had gone on submission a year earlier or 2 years earlier, before that movie proved to be such a success, it would not have been the same environment. And so it just shows how, you know, a couple small, not a couple small, but one movie could really make a huge difference for an entire community. And I hope that it's here to stay, that it isn't just a trend.
Yeah, no, that's so important. Representation matters. And it's taken a long time for, many races and ethnicities to make their mark in that world, but it's starting to happen. The shift is happening. And so, yeah, that's great that they weren't asking you to change things. Because obviously, you wrote certain characters in mind, and it would, it's not easy to just change how you've envisioned your character to be.
Yes, because our backgrounds are a huge part of who we are in the world, right? Like to change somebody's race would be to change them completely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, take credit
yes.
in the work that you've presented to them, because it's something else.
Oh, thank you so much. And, if this TV show ever gets made, I hope it, continues to open doors for the writers and the filmmakers and the showrunners that come after, because, a few of us can make a big difference.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Kristen, for talking with us today. Absolutely, again, love the book, and enjoyed our chat.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate the questions. These were so thoughtful and fun.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristen. It was a fascinating read for sure.
Appreciate it. Okay, take care, everyone.
Take care.
You
Have a good
too.
day. Bye.
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 Thank you for kicking back and relaxing with us. We hope you'll join us again on Relaxing Reads.